You might sound.
Oh no, yeah, this is your 7, sorry, that's my fault.
Lord, please bless us now as we open your word. May you guide us into all truth, for we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
There is mine. All right, good afternoon. Where did we leave off? We're looking at fractals, how they work, and we're looking specifically at the line of 144,000 as a model for the line of the priest. And we were identifying how it is, what it looks like. We're using illustrations to demonstrate how the waymarks in this line provide models for the waymarks in this line. The waymarks in the line of the priest, 2014, 2019, 2021, they look like waymarks in the line of the priest, Sunday law, close of probation, second coming. But they're not, we're unpacking what that means, what it looks like, that that 2014 is a fractal of Sunday law, 2019 is a fractal of close of probation, and 2021 is a fractal of the second coming. We looked at 2021 and 2019 specifically, and Trevor asked us to go through 2014. And the angle that we were taking with it was looking at passages in the Spirit of Prophecy, specifically Great Controversy, which speak about this time period, Sunday law to the close of probation. We went to the chapter, the final warning in Great Controversy. That's what we laid out here. We placed the chapter within its context in the flow of events laid out in Great Controversy. And as Great Controversy lays out the flow of events leading to the second coming, we see that it corresponds with the waymarks in the history of Adventism, right? American Reformer, chapter 18, the chapters that take you to 1844, the chapters, the final warning, which takes you to the Sunday law loud cry time period, time of trouble, chapter 39, and so on. We looked specifically at the passage in Great Controversy 608, and that's where we spent a lot of time, particularly in the second study. And that's the visual illustration that we have here. We began in 608, and what was the issue? What was the issue that we were discussing, that we wrestled over to try to understand? I think, well, before coming to the specific issue in the passage we're reading, the fundamental thing we were tackling is how we read. Yes, we saw that, at a glance, right? We read and interpret very differently, right? And we need to drill ourselves to do what? To what?
To read it right.
We need to drill ourselves to read it right. Yes. What does that entail?
Slowly.
Slowly. And what else, Debray?
Yeah, but so I can't forget the word.
Slowly. Mrs. also says carefully.
To read in context.
Yeah,
To read in context.
that's what.
Paragraph. Comma by comma.
Right.
Grammatically, yeah.
And are we used to that? No, right? We're used to just reading Spirit Prophecy like a novel, right? Like casual reading, like recreational reading, at least with that level of intellectual engagement in terms of how we're reading the passages. And we're realizing that that is just not adequate. We really need to be careful, and we need to understand grammar. We need to read in context, right? All these things we need to consider.
I think as well, the issues do repeat and level progression.
And those are some of the things that we identify. The passage. What is the flow, particularly where you're looking at a number of paragraphs? What is taking place? What is the flow of thought being presented? Is it a repetition and enlargement? Is it an elaboration upon a core thought? Or is it a progression of thought that she is presenting, right? These are all things that we need to drill ourselves and become used to doing, right? And I thought this exercise was really useful because I had no intention of spending a lot of time on it, but we ended up doing so, and I think it was important. So having said that, we come to Great Controversy 608, right? Now, specifically with the passages, with the paragraphs we're dealing with, what was the issue? What was the issue to break? Narrate the issue and narrate what we laid out yesterday, as you remember it.
Okay. We identified that the individual was at the Sunday law. We know that the falling away, I think the issue at first was we tried to work out if the falling away was prior to the Sunday law or at the Sunday law.
Okay.
We concluded that it was at the Sunday law, and then it was progressive. We looked at paragraph 2, and it stated as the storm approaches. And I think we had an issue if the storm was at the Sunday law, but we noticed that that was further on. We then looked into that was it. We saw that there was a test, and we tried to locate when that test was. And I think people were saying the test is the Sunday law, and then the issue was the test is perhaps progressive from the Sunday law to the storm. I think that was, we spent quite a lot of time trying to identify what the test was. We came to the conclusion that the test was at the Sunday law, but people would be falling off even after that period, and they would become the opposition. And where did we get to?
Yeah, we've got it there, abandoned position, test, Sunday law.
Ellen White in, I'm not sure if it's paragraph 2 or 3, she mentions the word storm twice. And we got a distinction that, so let me just get that, I don't want to misquote her. If anyone can recall, was it in the second or
Paragraph
third?
3.
It was in paragraph 3.
Yeah, halfway down, yet when the storm of opposition.
Halfway down.
608.3.
Oh, there we go. So, yet when the storm of opposition and the pressure builds upon them, some overwhelming. Okay, I think the issue was we came to an assumption that the mention of the word storm here was as the storm approaches. So we kind of, I think we wrestled with, it's talking about, oh, as the storm approaches, we were saying, oh, it must be at the Sunday law. So because we saw the same word used, we automatically, not speaking on behalf of everybody, but I believe there was individuals who believed that as the storm approaches, Ellen White was referring to that storm starting at the Sunday law, but we've worked out she's referring to a storm as in a storm of opposition. So we identify there's two distinctions, even though she uses the same word.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this test, which is the Sunday law, it produces imprisonment, exile, slavery. It produces persecution, and this persecution here, this is also this storm, which is referred to as 608, paragraph 3. It helps to lay it out diagrammatically, because when you get a visual, it's much
Clearer to see.
it's much clearer to see. Okay, thank you for that. I think that's as far as we got. Any thoughts? Questions?
Did we fully read paragraph 3? Because I noticed that we kept jumping back to number 2 throughout the
Well,
majority.
we can read it now. Would someone like to read it? Okay, I'll read it. Oh, you got it?
In the time of persecution, the faith of the Lord's servants will be tried. They have faithfully given the warning, looking to God and to his word alone. God's spirit moving upon their hearts has constrained them to speak. Stimulated with holy zeal and with the divine impulse strong upon them, they entered upon the performance of their duties. Without coldly calculating the consequences of speaking to the people the word which the Lord had given. They have not consulted their temporal interests, nor sought to preserve their reputation or their lives. Yet when the storm of opposition and reproach bursts upon them, some overwhelmed with consternation will be ready to exclaim, had we foreseen the consequences of our words, we would have held our peace. They are hedged in with difficulties. Satan assails them with fierce temptations. The work which they have undertaken seems far beyond their ability to accomplish. They are threatened. Sorry, man, I'm getting an email.
Or wasn't recorded? Right, go ahead.
Sorry, something's on my computer. The work which they have undertaken seems far beyond their ability to accomplish. They are threatened with destruction. The enthusiasm which animated them is gone, yet they cannot turn back. Then, feeling their utter helplessness, they flee to the Mighty One for strength. They remember that the words which they have spoken were not theirs, but his who bade them are giving the warning. God put the truth into their hearts, and they could not forbear to proclaim it.
Do you have any thoughts on that paragraph in addition to what was put in place yesterday? No, any thoughts? Then she goes on to connect this storm of opposition that is taking place in this time period of falling away. She connects it with the experience of the reformers during the 1260. She says, the same trials have been experienced by men of God in ages past. Wycliffe, Huss, Luther, Tyndale, Baxter, Wesley urged that all doctrines be brought to the test of the Bible and declared that they would renounce everything which it condemned. Against these men, persecution raged with relentless fury. Yet they ceased not to declare the truth. Different periods in the history of the church have each been marked by the development of some special truth adapted to the necessities of God's people at that time. Every new truth has made its way against hatred and opposition. Those who were blessed with its light were tempted and tried. The Lord gives a special truth for the people in an emergency. Who dare refuse to publish it? He commands his servants to present the last invitation of mercy to the world. They cannot remain silent, except at the peril of their souls. Christ's ambassadors have nothing to do with consequences. They must perform their duty and leave the results with God. So what is she saying here? She's speaking of this persecution, right, at the Sunday law, which is the storm of opposition taking place between the passing of the Sunday law and the storm that she's identifying as yet future, right? And in speaking of it, she's connecting it to the experience of the reformers in having a phase of present truth opened up to them and proclaiming that present truth in the face of opposition and persecution. And then she brings it back in the last couple of sentences, saying, he commands his servants to present the last invitation of mercy to the world. What's the last invitation of mercy? Right, the third angel, right, being given in connection with the angel of Revelation 18. Right, that's the last invitation of mercy to the world. And when does that begin? Sunday law. And it extends to when? Close of probation. So I think we can see again and again that it's referring to this period of time. This period of time from the Sunday law leading up to the storm.
When the paragraph before 608,
Yes.
did they, is it talking about the end of it?
Which?
As you read to the end, it says they wouldn't have, they did what they were supposed to do, meaning they finished their work, right? They preached the word, the result was bad, but they did what they were supposed to do and it was done.
Which sentence are they referring to?
That they are threatened with destruction. The work which they had undertaken seemed far beyond their ability to accomplish. They are threatened with destruction, but they can't turn back.
Third sentence from the bottom.
Yeah, I see it.
And then the very last sentence, I mean, the second to last, they remember that the words which they have spoken were not theirs, but his who bade them give warning. So are they saying that they're done proclaiming it? Is this the end of their proclamation?
How do you read that?
That's how I read it. Because it says God put the truth in their hearts and they could not forbear to proclaim it. They're threatened with destruction because of it.
So how do you read that? I think before we come to that, I meant to ask Trevor, did you get to, because you said you take time to go through the passage with the visual illustration. Did you get time to?
Yeah.
Do you have any new thoughts in connection with that?
No, I see what you're saying.
You see it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's good. So you're saying, yeah, how do you read that?
Because it's kind of mixed all throughout the paragraph. Because even at the beginning, it says they didn't calculate the consequence. So it's like they're speaking and then the consequences come. And it says that they wouldn't had they known.
So she adopts a tone of speaking reflectively, right? She's speaking from a position of sort of looking back at their experience, and so that's why it sounds like it's past tense, right? She's speaking reflectively. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay.
Says they have not consulted their temporal interests, nor to preserve their reputation or their lives. Yet when the storm of opposition bursts upon them, some overwhelmed with consternation will be ready to exclaim, had we foreseen the consequences of our words, we would not have held our peace. They are hedged in with difficulties. Satan assails them with fierce temptations. The work which they have undertaken seems far beyond their ability to accomplish. They are threatened with destruction. The enthusiasm which animated them is gone, yet they cannot turn back. Then, feeling their utter helplessness, they flee to the mighty one for strength. Is it the paragraph? They remember that the words which they have spoken were not theirs, but his who bade them give the warning, right? So I think reading it in line with the previous sentences, she's describing the experience of proclaiming the message in this time of persecution, right? So that sentence is in that same vein, where it says, they remember that the words which they have spoken were not theirs. The words which they have which they spoke when?
In that time period.
In that time period. That the words which they spoke in this time period were not theirs, right? Even though the result is it's brought them persecution throughout this time period.
So it brings them to the end, right?
Well, it's speaking of the same time period that we've been dealing with
Mhm.
in the previous paragraphs.
Yeah,
So it's the experience that leads to the storm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll say yes. Now the next paragraph, GC 610, it says, as the opposition rises to a fiercer height, the servants of God are again perplexed, for it seems to them that they have brought the crisis. But conscience and the word of God assure them that their course is right. And although the trials continue, they are strengthened to bear them. The contest grows closer and sharper, but their faith and courage rise with the emergency. Their testimony is, we dare not tamper with God's word, dividing his holy law, calling one portion essential and another non-essential, to gain the favor of the world. The Lord whom we serve is able to deliver us. Christ has conquered the powers of earth, and shall we be afraid of a world already conquered? Right, so here she's identifying that in this time period, the intensity of the persecution that they experience escalates, right? As the opposition rises to a fiercer height, the contest grows closer and sharper, right? So this time period, from the Sunday law to the storm, there's an escalating intensity of persecution that they suffer.
So you're not marking in the first sentence, you're not marking the crisis of the storm.
How can we?
I don't know, it's just weird. Because it seems like a crisis would be the end of the cause and effect.
What do you mean? What are you reading? How are you reading?
Very first sentence
It says?
says, opposition rises to fiercer height.
Which opposition?
The opposition of those against them for the words that they're speaking
But where's that opposition?
in that time period.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you want to call it the storm?
I'm just saying that I don't know. I guess because we always mark the crisis. Like the crisis is where your character is revealed. And so I always picture the crisis at the end point where you no longer can change. The crisis reveals what you are.
Well, that's the thing. We need to forget what we picture.
Sure, but is that not the case?
That's what?
That the crisis reveals your character?
I guess what I want us to do is you're bringing in thoughts. What is the passage giving us and telling us? That's what we've been trying to do. There are other thoughts that we could bring in. The crisis reveals character. That's another line of thought that is not being brought out by the passage that we're dealing with. The other thoughts that you could bring in from other passages. But I think it would be easier, less confusing, if we just focus on identifying what the passage is teaching. Yes, characters revealed in a crisis, but what bearing does that have on what this passage is saying?
Either way, it's saying that the opposition, so the words that they're speaking, the result is the crisis, which means it's cause and effect. And the last thing is the effect, which is the crisis.
Okay,
right?
okay, yeah,
So cause and effect, they have brought the crisis,
yes. What crisis is this that's being referred to?
the opposition
The opposition, which is
during that time.
during this time period.
Yeah.
But this opposition and this crisis is still distinct to a future development that is identified.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Are we okay? We'll be quiet today.
I mean, if we want to take a look at it as a storm, it is a storm, but it's a storm of opposition. So it's not the initial storm at the very end. So as far as a storm is concerned, and the crisis is that storm of opposition.
So I think if, is there any more?
Well, when we're talking about that perplexity, I mean, it says, as the opposition arises to a fiercer height, and the servants of God are again perplexed, for it seems to them that they have brought the crisis. So again, it's talking about those faithful ones that when they're given that message, and then you find that your opposition arising because you're opposing that particular message, that now comes as your crisis. So that crisis is nothing less than that storm of opposition.
That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
So I think we're on the same page thus far, as far as the reading of 608 up to 610 that we've read, that is dealing with how, at least what this passage is teaching. So the question is, what is the storm? What is the storm?
Wait, do we have to keep reading to find out
Will it tell you?
that well better? How are we gonna know? Next chapter?
It won't tell you. You won't find it in this chapter. In the subsequent paragraphs, she then goes on, she's elaborating upon this experience in this time period intervening between the Sunday law and the storm. There's that famous quote that we use, GC 611, the angel who unites in the proclamation of the third angel's message is to lighten the whole earth with his glory. A work of worldwide extent and unwanted power is here foretold. The Advent movement of 1840 to 1844 is a glorious manifestation of the power of God. So she is connecting the experience of the angel of Revelation 18, right, in this time period that we've been talking about with the Advent movement. And the paragraph after that, she says the work will be similar to that of the day of Pentecost. So she's connecting the proclamation of the message in this Sunday Lord time period to the Advent movement. She's connecting it to Pentecost as well. The next paragraph, the great work of the gospel is not to close with less manifestation of the power of God than marked its opening. That's where she ties it all back together, all to ties Pentecost to this time period of the angel of Revelation 18. And she then in the last paragraph says, the message will be carried not so much by argument, but by the deep conviction of the Spirit of God. So she doesn't actually tell you what the storm is. Right, so how do you deduce that? What is the storm?
I'm just kind of wondering now, and maybe I'm incorrect in this your application, but when we take a look at the storm of opposition, this is but a small storm in comparison to the large storm. And so when we come to that point there where we see the great storm, it would be that all the people would be against you. And in comparison, because now there's a close of probation, there's no more mediator, there's no more nothing there. So everybody's against it. Now everything is against.
I think that's a sound logical deduction. Right. Does anyone add to that?
Sorry, what did you say that last bit? You just saying it's a combination of reasons.
Yes, that that this storm, that there's this storm that sort of culminates in this larger storm at the end.
Which is more of the same.
Yes, but there's
Because when you're taking a look at this storm of opposition, this is the beginning of it, right?
Yeah.
And you can see it kind of escalates because as more and more are opposing, now everybody is against you.
it is more of the same, but
Yeah.
it's a climax, and you can distinguish the climax from the progression.
And because she says it rises to a new height, and you think, what does that mean? In the one paragraph she read,
Yes.
it says as the opposition rises to a new height. So it seems to start at this level, it rises to this height. And then when you get to the time of trouble chapter, she doesn't say storm, she doesn't say the word, but she says that in this fearful time the righteous, this is 614.1, in this fearful time the righteous must live in the sight of a holy God without an intercessor. The restraint which has been upon the wicked is removed, and Satan has entire control of the finally impenitent. So we've got this idea that it's now removed. They were under restraint before, even though they were persecuting. The wicked have passed the boundary of their probation, persistently resisted, spirits being withdrawn, unsheltered by divine grace. They have no protection from the wicked one. Satan will then plunge the inhabitants of the earth into one great final trouble. So if we say that one great final trouble is the storm.
I'm sorry, what was this?
This is 614.1.
614.
And I just wanted to pick out that bit, that it's one great final trouble. As the angels of God cease to hold and check the fierce winds of human passion, all the elements of strife will be let loose. So with elements of strife, the whole world will be involved in a ruin more terrible than that which came upon Jerusalem of old. And then she highlights one angel can do all this work of destruction. And then the last sentence of the next paragraph, there are forces now ready and only waiting divine permission to spread desolation everywhere.
It seems like it could also then be synonymous to crisis because there's a final crisis as well. There's crisis all along.
Oh yeah, and the next paragraph. Those who honour the law of God will be accused of bringing judgments upon the world, and they will be regarded as the cause of the fearful convulsions of nature, the strife and bloodshed among men that are filling the earth with woe. The power attending the last warning has enraged the wicked. Their anger is kindled against all who have received the message, and Satan will excite to still greater intensity the spirit of hatred and persecution. So it seems like it's a greater intensity of this same spirit of hatred and persecution in this one great final trouble, which is very similar to storm of opposition.
Yes.
So we went through a lot to talk about this word storm. And we come down to the end of the chapter and find that we don't have a clear, like she doesn't outright say what it is or whatever. So because the Sunday law is a period of time, and there's these progressive persecutions all the way after it, what is the big difference? Because I'm assuming there's got to be something I'm missing as far as the difference goes and how you see all this. If you see the storm as that after the Sunday law, it's the buildup of persecution all along the way, or if you see it as a future storm, how does that change what you read in the chapter? You know what I mean? Like, is there like a big fundamental difference that you're going to come out with? Because the next chapter is describing the storm, so it's still going to get described in the next chapter. No matter how you kind of read that storm in the chapter we're in, I think I might be missing a point that you're trying to make with really emphasizing what that is.
What the storm is.
Yeah.
Can I just make a quick point here? If you take a look at chapter 39, the title is called The Time of Trouble. Okay, and the very first things that it really primarily describes in chapter 39 is primarily Michael standing up, the close of probation. So if that means this is the time of trouble, that means that which is before then is a little time of trouble. So you can see how it kind of escalates going right into that time of trouble.
Yes, now you're using Adventist nomenclature, right?
But it's still, it's in the same thing with the storm though.
Adventist lingo,
Okay.
where, let me erase this, okay. Oh, we'll try, we'll speak to your question, Jeff. Well, I probably don't have to, yeah, I'm just going to lay this out again, what we have on the left there. So we have the Sunday law, and we have this storm, okay. And this is GC chapter 38, which is called the final warning.
Yeah.
And this is GC 39, which is time of trouble. It's the time of trouble, okay. And you know, we would call this the great time of trouble, yes? GOT, time of trouble.
That's the close of probation line.
Yes. And this we would call the little time of trouble.
That's our lingo.
Yes. I don't want to get sidetracked into going into this language of great time of trouble, little time of trouble. I think we can investigate it. That's essentially the little time of trouble is referring to this period of persecution that precedes the great time of trouble. The great time of trouble, this is also, what's another term for it?
Jacob's time of trouble.
Jacob's time of trouble. Are we okay with that, or do you want to actually go into that? You what?
So we can do that in my class.
Okay. Okay, yeah, you're going to do that in your class.
I'm going to touch on it with personal experience. What I was going to say about that line, what that does, I think, is because we have a certain concept of Jacob's time of trouble. What I think I did before this understanding of great compass. And I think our concept of it is that, you know, Jacob's resting alone in a quiet place by himself, having a mental struggle. And we think we might be in the caves or the mountains, we're away from everything, we're just having this personal struggle with God over whether we're saved or not. And I think that's the focus of it. It's a bit like our understanding of latter rain, it's limited, our Adventist understanding of it. When you read this chapter, as you see, she lays it out, you see that this escalating trouble in the world is going to be at its height in Jacob's time of trouble. And so I think we have perhaps conceptualized it a bit wrong. So we think we're going to go through all this horrible persecution, there's wars and bloodshed and famine everywhere. We're part of that in our cellular crisis. And then when we get to Jacob's time of trouble, we're somehow hidden away in a quiet corner. I think that's how we used to conceptualize it, but we're not. I think we're right in the midst of physical violence, bloodshed, turmoil. We're still in the midst of that, and having now on top of it a mental struggle, which is a bit like the cross. So he's on the cross, he's got so much physical pain, but the mental overshadows the physical. So she seems to stress the mental in Jacob's time of trouble. But when you see it as a little and a great time of trouble, you realize it's great because it's both. It's not just the physical persecution and opposition coming at you. It's the mental struggle now that really escalates, which you get a taste of in the chapter before when they start questioning, actually, did we do the right thing? We would never have spoken like this if we realised this was going to happen. And it's that mounting doubt on their part as well as the mounting increase of opposition, which I think gives us a bit, so that when we're still in that struggle and we're having these doubts, we can conceptualize actually we might be in dangerous some trouble here, because I think we won't have those doubts when that persecution is at its height. It's helpful to know you'll be going through both at the same time, I think. That's one thing.
So I guess, Trevor, your question is, what's the difference between this time period in which we see a progressive sort of escalation in the intensity of persecution, right? And this storm. Is that your question, fundamental, or repeat it?
Yeah, just you spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we knew that that particular sentence, the storm, was future. It wasn't describing the things that were previously mentioned. And then we go all the way to the end of the chapter, and it's a little bit ambiguous. But the next chapter basically describes the storm for sure.
And and what is it describing?
I think
As in what it was put a waymark to it.
Time of trouble, close of probation.
Close of probation. So it's clear to you.
Yeah.
All right. So call this COP.
So in that particular paragraph that we put all that energy into describing the storm, whether it's future or whether it's what was just described within that same paragraph, why is it so crucial to see that particular sentences pointing to the future, I guess? Like if a guy was to, like myself, read it and read it the other way the first time and say, okay, well, whether that storm's talking about all the calamities that were just spoken about, or whether it's talking about another future storm per se.
Okay. All right. So I guess the purpose was to establish that the storm that is yet future is at the close of probation, right? The reason why we spent so much time on it is because we weren't all agreed on it, right? And it was important that we understood the passage for what it was saying, because when we come here, we're contending that 608 through to the end, what we're reading is talking about Sunday law to close of probation, right? And the sort of the chapter kind of demarcates, it marks out the time period that it is talking about as a period of time from Sunday law to the close of probation. The problem is that some of us were, and the movement many of us were of the understanding that rather than demarcating that time period from the Sunday to close of probation, that very storm, right, was the Sunday law. Do you get it?
So seeing it as a point instead of the whole dispensation.
Yes, placing the storm at the Sunday law, right? It then makes it difficult. It means we cannot view this as a time period that we're going to take as a model for 2014 to 2019. We need to see that this is a period of time from the Sunday law waymark to the close of probation. The storm is the end point of this crisis that is being described in that chapter of great controversy.
So when we take our characteristics and we bring them down to 2014, we're saying, if we said it's all has to happen at 2014, that's just not how it is. If all that happened throughout the period of 2014 and 2019, and that gives us the ability to show that better.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
That
So
makes sense.
That's why it was really imperative that we all understood this the same way.
Right, because then we'd all say, oh, that didn't happen in 2014, neither did that.
Yeah. Okay. Right, to be able to identify as a period of time. So, as you see it, as I think as Katya pointed out, she does not describe, she does not name the storm anywhere, but she goes on to describe it in the next chapter, right? That whatever is going on, there's an escalating trouble that is taking place here. But in the descriptions that she uses, there's a marked development here, which distinguishes this point, this storm, from what has preceded it, right? Rather, she says that God's spirit is fully and finally withdrawn and Satan has complete control. And the world is plunged into a final and unprecedented trouble, right? In her language, it is, I'll use the term, it is intense enough. She's much more intense in her descriptions of what is taking place here to distinguish it from what has preceded. Does that make sense?
So we can say the storm is at its height, it's at its intensity, its highest intensity, and it hits the classification. That storm, when that storm hits the classification at that time period, is the height of classification.
Yes.
And I think that's helpful to see it like that, because when we look at our history, 2014 to 19, we just see a series of fallings away until we get to the height of the storm, whenever May falls off, the most dangerous messenger falls off. And that's really the height of an internal conflict. And now we see the persecution coming from that quarter against us.
Yeah.
And I think that we can clearly see that progression.
Yeah.
And in a world that's intensifying, we've never seen a crisis like this in its intensity since 9/11. So we can trace that progression.
It makes the most sense to try and scare us off right before the last moment, right? That's why, it makes sense that it would be the most aggressive right there.
So I guess having agreed on the structure, on the location of this passage, what are the ways in which it typifies our time period from 2014 to 2019? So looking at Sunday law to the close of probation, as illustrated, how does, because 2014, 2019, as we can say, is a fractal of Sunday law to close of probation. So how does 2014, 2019 look like the Sunday law to the close of probation, based on what we've been reading from, I guess, these two chapters?
Well, there was the rain at one point.
The range. There's the angel of Revelation 18, right? That brought the rain. Okay. Unpack that further. The rain is coming to what?
Like the latter.
The latter rain. Yeah. It's coming to empower a message, right?
Yeah.
There's a message empowered. We read that in chapter 38, right? All those, it's like Pentecost, it's like 1840 to 1844. What else?
Opposition.
Opposition. Opposition from who?
Opposition from the world for the Sunday law to the close of probation.
Let's go back to what we read. Who was it who is fighting the message?
Oh, the ones that
God's
were
people.
Former brethren.
former brethren that were actually, I don't know what it said, teachers or,
Yeah.
they weren't just, they actually were prominent in the message or whatever.
I think, you see an escalating falling away. You've got arrows over that side saying falling away. I'm saying, we have the just, we have Mark Bruce, we have mining, FFA, it's kind of like a succession falling away.
Progressive falling away. So the RAIN, the empowered message, this was, what would we call this in our time? The Midnight Cry. Okay.
Wow.
Because
Well-
it's progressive.
Yeah, like
There
we've
was
said
other-
since 2014, the broader rain versus the earlier rain, right?
The peak of it.
It's progressive.
Yeah.
Right. The opposition of former brethren and the progressive falling away. Sister Emma, you're saying,
And part of the just, Mark Bruce.
Path of the Justice was 2014.
Yeah,
Um,
not just 2016.
Tree of Life.
Tree of Life, 2016.
Holmes and those guys.
I know you want to chat, but that we saw him go off as well.
What year was that? Joe, what year was it?
2016 with the lights of South, wasn't it? Just
It was 26, and they took people.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. What was it? That was Psalm 23.
That was not 2017.
It was in Romania. What year did you were there? What year was it? Was that 2016? No, Romania
2016 was December when we heard.
Yeah, it was the next fall that we were in.
was 2017.
Yeah, it was 17. It's not.
Psalm 23.
Including 10 and Connor, but they would see it.
They're under Tree of Life.
What about Holmes?
Alms. That's the. Yeah. Alms. When was that?
2016.
After, but remember it was at that camp that.
Yeah, it was after 2017 because I remember that's when Deontay was alienated in Romania with Sherwood.
That's true.
So it's 2018 then. 2018. So you have, but although Alms didn't have any like major doctrinal sort of contribution, but they were teachers, I guess. Alms 2018. And then FFA itself 2019.
So I'm gonna just take a look at that. Primarily, each one of them is dealing with leaders.
Yeah, all of them had leading teachers, prominent men
Yeah,
at the head of them.
and generally those that were more educated in one way or another.
We're just missing 2015.
Is more educated, more said.
Well, I guess because they have that leadership, right? Yeah. I'll just keep it with leaders. I think
Except
that
for
would suit it
Psalms
better.
23.
Teachers.
Yeah,
Leading teachers.
leading teachers, yes.
Really?
They just,
Well, it was all people who had a platform, people who were listened to and had influence,
The
people
influential.
who were promoted by
There you
FFA.
Yeah.
You know. And you see with each one of them, they turned to become, as we read in this chapter, the worst enemies of their former brethren. You know, so you definitely see that parallel. What else do we see from what we read in this Synod of Probation?
We didn't read it in this passage, I think, did we? But people go out, people come in.
Yes. Oh, there's actually Because this isn't the only passage that deals with this time period. We're going to go to Testimonies, Volume 8. But I just want to see from this passage, what can we draw? We're going to go from what we were reading.
What about the affection will be alienated, children will be disinherited and driven from home? I know that happened to some of the brethren that I met in 2016. Their parents took them out.
In fact, that's happened in a lot.
So a lot of
It's in the close in the text. I don't know that anybody was brought before a court. One
Well,
of
they
the
haven't
things
in
it
certain
says.
countries of Africa.
yeah, some brethren have to be
You
brought before courts. Some brethren put in prison, literally.
Okay, let's go check that one off.
Does it have to be worldwide?
I think one good aspect is like in paragraph 609, paragraph 1, where it talks about all doctrine be brought to the test of the Bible. So really doctrines are also being tested at this point in time.
Well, the conflict is over the truth. It's over a message.
Right.
It's over this specific message.
But I mean, when it's saying all, that means it's not just certain ones, but it's everything.
True. That's correct.
Satan assails them with fierce temptations.
Can anyone testify to that? Fiercely tempted.
That's kind of knocking over after the relation. But no, yeah, I think you're not. 14 to 19. I think all those shakings affected different people, how closely they knit they were with those ministries.
Yeah, they did. So we can see that. Does that answer your question, Trevor? As to how it is that Sunday Lord, that 24 and 20 is a fractal of what we see Sunday Lord to close of probation. We see the message, we see the developments as they are great controversy so far. We see them being repeated to scale.
And I'm going to go to the other person.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you're gonna go to the other passage, which I think that's about all I could pull from this one.
Okay. The other passage, let's look at Testimonies, Volume 8, page 41.
Testimonies, Volume 8.
Okay, Testimonies, page 41. Someone would like to read that?
In vision, I saw two armies in terrible conflict. One army was led by banners bearing the world's insignia. The other was led by the bloodstained banner of Prince Emmanuel. Standard after standard was left to trial in the dust as company after company from the Lord's army joined the foe, and tribe after tribe from the ranks of the enemy united with the commandment-keeping people of God. An angel flying in the midst of heaven put the standard of Emmanuel into many hands, while a mighty general cried out with a loud voice, "Come into line, let those who are loyal to the commandments of God and testimony of Christ now take their position. Come out from among them, and be ye separate, and touch not the unclean. And I will receive you, and I will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters. Let all who will come up to the help of the Lord against the mighty."
The battle raged, victory alternated from side to side. Now the soldiers of the cross gave way as when the standard bearer fainted. Isaiah 10:18. But their apparent retreat was put to gain a more advantageous position. Shouts of joy were heard, a song of praise to God went up, and angel voices united in the song as Christ's soldiers planted his banner on the walls of the fortress till then held by the enemy. The captain of our salvation was ordering the battle and sending support to soldiers. His power was mighty displayed, encouraging them to press the battle to the gates. He taught them terrible things in righteousness as he led them on step by step, conquering and to conquer.
At last, the victory was gained. The army following the banner with the inscription, "The commandments of God and the faith of Jesus," was gloriously triumphant. The soldiers of Christ were close beside the gates of the city, and with joy the city received her king. The kingdom of peace and joy and everlasting righteousness was established. So how do we understand this passage? So, is that
It looks like it takes not only the period of the Sunday, but the Sunday to the return of Christ.
yeah,
It's-
if we lay out the passage, look at the passage, what it's saying.
Well, we have those two armies, which are those who give the loud cry, the third angel's message, and those who are fighting against them.
So before you come there, laying out just what the passage gives us, it ends with
The second coming.
the second coming, with the saints by the gates of the New Jerusalem,
Mhm.
right? And this is the conflict. Yes.
So they are giving this loud cry. And while these people, coming and helping them all along the way. But even though in the middle of the battle, they feel that they lost the conflict, actually, they hear something, that let them know that they are victorious.
Okay. There's some details there. There are two armies. You have this conflict, and there are two armies, yes?
Mhm.
That are standing in opposition to one another.
Standard I can perceive as the word of God or the law.
Yeah, so we can, says, one army was led by banners bearing the world's insignia. The other was led by the bloodstained banner of Prince Emmanuel.
So, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
This is the time when we're losing people, but there's more people coming in than leaving.
Well,
Becoming supporters.
so it says companies leave. Company after company join the ranks of the enemy. Companies leave and tribes join. Right, so there's pictured an exchange, Yeah. Some people are leaving the Lord's army, joining the ranks of the enemy. Some people on the enemy side are leaving. So what are companies and tribes?
Okay, just taking a look at the definition, we're taking a look at military, and they're classifying it somewhere around 60 to 100.
60 to 100.
Yeah.
That's a company.
Primarily, that's what they're classifying as a company in an army.
Okay. So a company is a group. You have groups leaving and groups joining. Yes? And what's the definition of a tribe?
Okay, tribe, family, race, or series of generations.
Again, it's a reference to an aggregation. It's a reference to a group.
But more in a family atmosphere.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what we can do with that aspect.
A class, or as distinct people, you could rather say.
Yeah, a distinct people, a people.
Yeah.
It's an aggregation, right? It's not a symbol. It's a reference to a group. Whether it's a military group, whether it's a group with reference to a family of people, it's still a reference to a group. So you have companies and you have tribes. So you have two groups.
So like you have the standard after standard was left in the dust as these people leave.
So they're places in the Lord's army, and these people are leaving gaps as they join the other side.
And an angel flying in the midst of heaven put the standard of Emmanuel into many hands, while a mighty general cried out with a loud voice. So I guess that those standards are replaced.
Yeah.
People
So,
came in.
right, there's a replacement of those who leave, yes? And Katya had said, you had mentioned loud cry.
Yes, because, what does it say? See, an angel is flying in the midst of heaven. So that must be the Revelation 18. And put the standard of Emmanuel into many hands, while the mighty general cried out with a loud voice, coming to line.
So there's a loud cry. And then there's eventual victory, right? Victory for the righteous. Okay. Is there any more points that we can deduce just from looking at the laying out what the passage is teaching?
Going to fighting over a fortress or a city. That really says anything else. Some song.
And that's part of it, you know, when you're dealing with these passages and these visions, which are parables, you know, what portions of it are the significant portions and what portions of it are just noise?
Like in the next paragraph, it says, now the church is militant. But that's almost like it's switching to a new scene, maybe. Yeah, but the day is coming in which the battle will have been fought. And the victory is won.
You said, Emma?
Actually, because it's all a parable up to now, isn't it? With the captain in battle, the language. Is she making application in the next parable now? The church is
Shall I read it?
Just,
already quite about the battle is it's very visible. So there's public standards. You know, they've both got clear flags or end signs of what they're doing. So when you relate that to civil organizers, it's clear there's two sides. And it becomes a visible controversy now. These two armies fighting people.
In another paragraph, it says this, this is the scene that is presented to me, but the church must and will fight against seen and unseen foes. Satan's agencies in human form are on the ground. Men have confederated to oppose the Lord of hosts. These confederacies will continue until Christ shall leave his place of intercession before the mercy seat and shall put on the garments of vengeance. So this battle ends before probation, seems like.
Is that the next paragraph?
Oh, that's AT 42.2.
The banners are visible standards. Which in the context of the final crisis which takes you to the second coming are God's law, versus Sunday.
Man's law.
Yeah. So, as I said, there's the vision, then she makes application in the following paragraph. If we read that, it says, now the church is militant. Now we are confronted with a world in midnight darkness, almost wholly given over to idolatry. But the day is coming in which the battle will have been fought and the victory won. The will of God is to be done on earth as it is done in heaven, but the nations will own no other law than the law of heaven. All will be happy, all will be a happy united family, clothed with the garments of praise and thanksgiving, the robes of Christ's righteousness. All nature in its surpassing loveliness will offer to God a constant tribute of praise and adoration. The world will be bathed in the light of heaven. The years will move on in gladness. The light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold greater than it is now. Over the scene, the morning stars will sing together, and the sons of God will shout for joy, while God and Christ will unite in proclaiming, there shall be no more sin, neither shall there be any more death. This is the scene that is presented to me, but the church must and will fight against seen and unseen foes. Satan's agencies in human form are on the ground. Men have confederated to oppose the Lord of hosts. These confederacies will continue until Christ shall leave his place of intercession before the mercy seat and shall put on the garments of vengeance. Satanic agencies are in every city, busily organizing into parties those who oppose the law of God. Professed saints and avowed unbelievers take their stand with these parties. This is no time for the people of God to be weaklings. We cannot afford to be off our guard for one moment. All right, so this adds some important information, this application. I'll add it to my notes because I haven't done so. Okay. Well, firstly, from how she presents it, All right, 5 minutes. My question is, she says, now the church is militant. In applying this passage, says now the church is militant. Now we are confronted with the world of midnight darkness. She's speaking of this vision as a representation of the present reality, right? And when we come down to page 42.2, she says, Satan's agencies in human form are on the ground. Men have confederated to oppose the Lord of hosts. These confederacies will continue until Christ shall leave his place of intercession before the mercy seat. Satan's agencies are in every city, busily organizing into parties those opposed to the law of God, right? So these, in the vision that she saw, these Satan's army, right? The tribes that, rather the hosts that comprise Satan's army, tribes of which leave to join God's people. These are the parties that she's referring to here. Satan's agencies are in every city, busily organizing into parties those opposed to the law of God. Professed saints and avowed unbelievers take their stand with those parties, right? So it's describing Satan's army as comprising of these parties organized by the agencies of Satan. But she's speaking of it as a present development. So remember that our first step before making any application is simply to lift and lay out what the passage is communicating on its own, right? So where is she standing? Where is she when this passage was written? There's a Review and Herald passage. Review and Herald. This 80 page 41 is found in Review and Herald, November 26, 1903. So if we're going to put it at the Sunday law, we're now jumping into what? If we say it's talking about the Sunday law, we're now jumping into what? What are we doing? Is that what the passage is saying, literally?
You mean without time?
I'm saying, we're saying this conflict is Sunday law to the second coming, right? But if you read the passage and we lay out its original intent, just as it reads, she's speaking of this conflict between the two armies as a present reality. She says now, right? So it's a present reality to her where she is standing, and it goes from her where she is standing through to the second coming. So as our first step here, all we're doing here is we're not making application. We're simply laying out what the passage is teaching us, right? So the conflict, is it correct to say it begins at the Sunday law based on what we read?
No.
And if we're going to say it is, we're moving from original intent to application.
And also it doesn't end at the second coming, according to the paragraph.
When does it end?
She says, and will continue until Christ shall leave his place of intercession. So,
Well, she says that there, but the vision, you have the saints around the gates of the city. So it does take you at least to the second coming in the vision portion. You said what? All right, so all the time. So we've laid out just what the passage is presenting, right? we'll conclude with this, we'll make application and identify what it is telling us about our time period from 2014 to 2019. I hope we caught that. This is a very important exercise, a very important thing to learn how to do, right? Look at what is the passage teaching and stay in that. Forget about application. Just lay out as we did here. And as we did here, just lay out what the passage is teaching. Once you've understood that in all its parameters, then you can start making application. You know, and once you, but doing this takes work, right? It's not it takes work and thought. It's not just the casual reading that we're used to as sort of like a prelude to application. We need to spend time here understanding what is being said before arriving at the application, which we're going to do in our next study. So I hope that's been useful. Let's pray.
Yeah.
Father in heaven, we thank you for your word. We thank you for the ground that we've been able to cover. We thank you for this school, Lord, all the important things that have been shared. And Lord, in these studies that we've been going through, Lord, we ask that you may help us to become more firm and more clear in the issue of methodology, how we are to handle your word. Help us individually to go back over these things and to practice. May you give us ability, Lord, that we may be your soldiers, ready and prepared for duty, Lord, when it is time to call out the Levites. Lord, we thank you for the school, and we ask that you may continue to allow things to move on in a smooth fashion. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.